And welcome to my Dawn Chorus for Wednesday, October the 13th. I'm Bernard Hickey for the Kaka. This is my podcast and video that goes out with an email newsletter to subscribers to the Kaka, which is a Substack all about Aotearoa's political economy around housing, climate and policy. In today's news, the housing market, with a few things tacked on, is how I see our economy. And so when the Reserve Bank changes the rules for pumping credit into the housing market, worth noting. And this is something that has pleased the government. But yesterday, the Reserve Bank decided, without warning or consultation, and without a permanent governor in place, to loosen the restrictions on LVR, high LVR lending. So currently, banks are restricted from no more than 20% of their new lending to go to owner-occupiers who are borrowing more than 80% of the value of a home. And that is going to be increased to 25% speed limit from December 1st. Now, for rental property investors, their speed limit is doubling from 5% to 10%. They're currently restricted from borrowing no more than 70% of the value of the home. However, the Reserve Bank is leaving the debt-to-income multiples unchanged, and it says that this is one of the reasons why it feels it can relax the LVRs, that the DTIs are in effect a type of guardrail against very aggressive lending to rental property investors in particular. Again, this is one way to get your economy going again, to fire up your housing market. And it certainly raises questions about what's the point of the Reserve Bank here? It is an independent inflation targeter, and it's all about keeping inflation low and keeping the financial system stable. But it hasn't contributed to making our housing affordable. And you could argue that that's the most important thing we have in our economy and society and politics at the moment. And it was the Reserve Bank's loosening of monetary policy, printing of $50 billion, and its removal of LVR restrictions in 2020 and 2021, which you can see from that chart there, that drove the significant increase in house prices there. And since then, we've seen house prices come off their peak, and that balance sheet recession, the wealth effect, has really cooled the response to the Reserve Bank's 300 basis points of rate cuts in the last 18 months or so. And now the Reserve Bank feels it can loosen those restrictions. One of the reasons it says it can is that it believes that the housing market is now sustainable again. I'll talk about that in a moment. So elsewhere in the news today, we heard from the Real Estate Institute that the housing market's fairly stagnant still. Now, volumes of sales of properties are up from last year, but effectively house prices are unchanged. They're actually down in Auckland, but that sort of offsets some of the rises elsewhere in the country. And the house price index, which takes account of different sales and different price brackets, it shows an actual fall from a year ago. And elsewhere in the news, we've got a fresh poll from the Post showing that Christopher Luxon's net unfavourability has risen 6 points to 24%, and that Nationals' support is down. The other news to watch out for today is that the IMF has overnight lifted its growth view for the global economy as some of the uncertainties around Donald Trump's tariffs are reduced. It's worth mentioning that when the government says that it's the uncertainty around tariffs and Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariff shock that's the reason for New Zealand's very slow growth this year. That's certainly not the case overseas. That's the first 5 minutes of our Dawn course, which is available to non-paying subscribers. And I'm going to go into more detail now for paying subscribers. And I welcome your subscription if you wanted to try us out. Right, so let's have a look at these LVR changes from December the 1st. So up to 25%, the speed limit from